This is what I've noticed the biggest indicator of what a lack of this intelligence looks like. So if you fear death more, you are lacking in this intelligence more. And I don't know if you've heard the quote, a fear of death is a fear of life. I think that is so true. So once again, this is pretty crucial. Alrighty. So what are the different kinds of intelligence and how can you apply this video to your everyday life? And how can you make use out of this video? Well, in my opinion, this video is incredibly important. And the reason is because this can dictate your future career of what you do. It could dictate how exactly you navigate through life itself, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and how to play to them. Now, how exactly is this framework based and why is it really important? Now, first off, I just want to say this framework is not the work of anyone else but myself, and some concepts of other models are helping in designing this framework of what exactly different kinds of intelligence look like and are. And in my view, other models are a little bit inaccurate and they don't account for certain kinds of behaviors. So it's why I made this framework of how intelligence works. Now, this list is insanely important for one specific reason, in my opinion, and it's because of AI and human behavior. Now, even if you took this playlist or this video and you looked at it before AI, I think this video would actually still help you quite a bit. Although when it comes to AI, I think AI kind of invalidates a lot of these intelligences, or at least it only amplifies them to such degrees that they're not necessarily needed in the workforce as much. Now, basically, to keep it really short, AI completes about 6 out of 12 of these different kinds of intelligence in the fraction of a time that it would take for a human to do all of this. And it only enhances current human intelligence by like 100-fold or 1,000-fold. I mean, it's insanely effective. And understanding different kinds of intelligence will help us understand how AI only enhances human effort and how the current school system, and more by the way, will become obsolete in time. And as you can see right here, people expected AI to do this sort of a thing and become the Terminator. In reality, it's actually just AI helping you create a picture, right? Like drawing for you. So I find that sort of funny. Yeah, I basically don't view AI as this sort of sentient thing, even though it may be sentient. I view it more so as this amplifier to human intelligence, as human intelligence already exists. Now, how exactly can you apply all of this to real life? So knowing the different kinds of intelligence and what you excel at and how AI, by the way, affects each of these will help guide you in a specific direction. And this can be about your career. It could be finding out what you want to do in life, what you're good at, what you can improve upon, and if you are strong in certain aspects, to combine those aspects together, which, by the way, a lot of thinking or jobs require multiple different kinds of intelligence, and it's important to identify all the ones that you are incredibly proficient in my opinion. Now, results, once again, speak far louder than words, and what you think you're intelligent at, it might not actually be what you're intelligent at. Don't delude yourself. Just look at results and see whether or not you are or aren't effective in it based on the results. In this case, memory can guide and help you in a certain direction when it comes to a profession of any sort. But with the advancement of AI, this will most likely dramatically affect nearly every single profession, and it will replace most likely a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people. And this is because intelligence is more so an algorithm of navigating information rather than compiling information itself. Memory is not actually a form of intelligence, and this is also demonstrated by how AI works itself, because AI even demonstrates how memory is not actually really intelligence. AI just works through algorithms and compiling a ton of data that you just throw at it, as well as other psychological models. So we'll get to that eventually. So first off, let's start off with the first kind of intelligence, analytical intelligence. One of them that will be invalidated probably the most. Analytical intelligence is the ability to dissect information, identify patterns, and evaluate evidence logically for structured problem solving. Now, in real life examples of analytical intelligence, it could be something like a parent budgeting family expenses by analyzing bills and income trends to cut costs effectively, or a data analyst in healthcare reviewing patient records to identify disease patterns and recommended treatments. Now, with memory, or already known prerequisite information, this is effective. I mean, extremely important when it comes to this analytical intelligence, because you have to have the prerequisite memory sometimes in order to solve some of these problems. Now, the thing is, AI is extremely strong in analytical intelligence, and I mean extremely, extremely strong, to the point where it has a ton of memory. One, it has far more than you will ever have, so it's able to work with a lot more. And two, its algorithm for basically analytical intelligence, because it has an algorithm for each one of these things, in my view. It's lacking in some of them right now, but it probably will develop eventually. In my view, this will invalidate many, many jobs, a ton of jobs. The second kind of intelligence is synthetic intelligence. In other words, what I would like to call creativity. And creativity is seeking what others see and thinking what no one else has ever thought. Now, I don't necessarily know if this was actually Albert Einstein, because I know there's so many quotes that are falsely attributed to him. But regardless, let's just assume that he did say this. So this right here is also going to be invalidated, sadly. And the reason is because creativity, one of the things that it requires is not just the algorithm of more effective creative thinking, but also memory. It requires a lot of different kinds of memory, because you're basically using a lot of different kinds of memory from a lot of different aspects. Now, real life examples of synthetic intelligence look something along the lines of a home-cooked blending of Middle Eastern spices with Mexican ingredients to invent a new taco recipe, as an example. I don't eat tacos, but that's just an example. Or a engineer at NASA combining biology and robotics to design bio-inspired Mars rovers or whatever, right? Now, certain AI are, once again, extremely strong in synthetic intelligence and creativity. And being able to be creative by being able to blend like unrelated concepts together, this, once again, AI is insanely efficient at this. So sadly, I think this is going to be another form of intelligence that AI just completely dominates. And the only real question is if you ask AI the right prompts, because that's basically how AI works. Anyways. The third kind of intelligence is adaptive intelligence. Now, adaptive intelligence is applying knowledge flexibly and unpredictably to situations and learning from feedback and pivoting your strategies. Now, when it comes to adaptive intelligence, I think these two quotes demonstrate it best. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. And the second quote, which I personally resonate with much more, because I grew up with this quote at quite a young age, I think like 11 years old. Empty your mind, be formless and shapeless like water. You put water in a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put water in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. That's Bruce Lee said this on an interview. If you've seen the original interview, you'll know what I'm talking about. Now, real life examples of adaptive intelligence look something along the lines of a startup founder pivoting from app development to e-commerce during marketing shifts, like a pandemic as an example, or a man in a life or death situation being on the edge because he's being chased by an organization and he must escape and find out how exactly he's going to escape or he's going to die. And he has to add tons of these things all at once, like a whistleblower as an example. In my opinion, whistleblowers who survive or who aren't caught, they are great examples of very high adaptive intelligence. AI is not particularly good at this in today's day and age when it comes to adaptive intelligence, although it's not necessarily terrible at it either. It doesn't do it on the fly. It does take a little bit of time. Now, most often, adaptive intelligence is referred to being street smart. So that is what you will hear people saying. Oh, they'll say, oh, you're street smart, right? That more so means you're probably along the lines of adaptive intelligence. Although, in my opinion, the best example of adaptive intelligence that I can think of is Richard Branson. He is incredibly, incredibly strong when it comes to adaptive intelligence. And if you don't know why, the reason is because he's basically dyslexic and he did terribly in all forms of his tests, which means his memory is either poor or his analytical intelligence is poor, but he's extremely successful career-wise. So yeah. Now, the fourth kind of intelligence is social connective intelligence. Now, this is charisma part 1, and this is group specific. So there's a difference between group specific intelligence in terms of your charisma and individual specific intelligence in terms of your charisma, which we'll get to eventually. Now, social connective intelligence is reading social dynamics, building networks, and influencing or collaborating effectively in groups. Real life examples of social connective intelligence look something along the lines of a community organizer rallying neighbors for a local cleanup by understanding group motivations, or another example, a better example in my opinion actually, is probably Nelson Mandela uniting diverse factions in post-apartheid South Africa via their reconciliation efforts. Now, these two quotes demonstrate this the best. Actually, this one quote demonstrates this. Now, this quote demonstrates it the best. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is basically what social connective intelligence looks like. And actually, this is what allows for humans to probably have part of the reason why humans dominate in terms of evolution is because we are able to work together on such large groups, like 100 guys versus one bear, right? Who's going to win? Well, probably the 100 guys, but the bear's probably going to kill a couple of the guys along the way, right? Anyways, now AI is very weak in this aspect, actually. And it may understand it better in the future, but currently it is incredibly lacking in this aspect. One of the most charismatic people in history can turn a wrong place, wrong time situation, or even vice versa, into a 100x multiplier because of their social connective intelligence. And the best example of this is our little friend on the right who does his little salute. Yeah, this guy, he is extremely strong social connective intelligence. So this is a good example of very strong social connective intelligence. Now he is, people would consider him on the evil side, right? But there's also a opposite version of him who isn't on the evil side, right? So it really depends on how you view it, and you just watch my Think for Yourself playlist. You'll figure out what I'm talking about. Anyways, besides the morality thing, let's elaborate a little more on this one, because this one I think is a little important to elaborate on. Now, when it comes to social connective intelligence, men are incredibly effective at this. If exclusively, though, men are working in the group to collaborate, but they often lack being able to read social dynamics. Now, this kind of intelligence is what women are naturally, by the way, geniuses in terms of them actually understanding how the dynamics work. And their subconscious is designed for this understanding and for relationships. In fact, this is how they determine interaction in some sense. But not taking initiative in their sense is the reason why you don't see them in this field. More specifically, you don't see women leaders too often. That's basically what I mean. When I say social connective intelligence, I usually mean you're a leader in this sense. Now, even though, to elaborate a little bit more on this, women do everything in the social connective thing, like reading social dynamics or building networks or influencing a group. They intentionally sometimes try to sabotage the group or the network. And the reasons are often due to jealousy or competition in a lot of cases. So that's the reason why if you have a woman as your boss, you might absolutely despise them for this reason. Yeah, this is very common. I've seen this far too often. The fifth kind of intelligence is emotional resilient intelligence. Now, emotional resilient intelligence is perceiving, managing, and leveraging emotions of yourself and others for recovery and growth. And you might say, okay, that sounds a little corny. What exactly does that look like? Well, real life examples of that look like a man handling rejection from a woman and being able to deal with emotions and seeking new opportunities anyways. Yep, there's a really good chance you don't have this. Or a therapist guiding clients through trauma by modeling emotional regulation techniques. So yeah, and this quote by Nelson Mandela here, basically, to keep it really short, in rising every single time we fall. Yeah, that's pretty much the main thing. You just keep getting back up. I don't know if I think Rocky movie or something said something along those lines as well. Basically the same thing. Now, although women are not designed for this at all, biologically especially, men are completely lacking this today, especially when it comes to being rejected by women. And this is a huge reason why men today are very, very feminine and why relationships have so much arguing in them and so much other stuff. And if you're interested in that, go check out the relationship playlist. Go check out all my playlists. All this information is for free, and it's invaluable information. The sixth kind of intelligence is kinesthetic operational intelligence. Now, kinesthetic operational intelligence is coordinating physical actions, tools, and senses for precise environmental manipulation. And this can come in many forms. And one quote that I like the most about this intelligence is, "The body achieves what the mind believes." Now, there's this really interesting thing where I think it was like a 6-minute mile or a something minute mile. I can't remember. It was something that wasn't able to be broken before. And then once it was broken once, so many other people a couple months later or weeks later or whatever were able to start breaking this record as well. I find this incredibly interesting, but that's actually a completely different topic. An example of kinesthetic operational intelligence looks something along the lines of an Olympic athlete demonstrating their abilities and how much better they are than the average population. What I mean by this is more so along the lines of like coordinating fluid movement, right? Or a mechanic diagnosing and fixing a car engine through hands-on trial and adjustment. Now, what I mean by this is just because you increase the amount of memory, for instance, if you increase the amount of things that you can remember, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are kinesthetically operationally intelligent in this case. That is not what it is. So you building your muscles in this case and getting them really big, that's not kinesthetic operational intelligence. That's the equivalent of memory to intelligence that I've mentioned before in my video. So your working out doesn't really mean much, actually, sadly, if you are working out in order to get big muscles. Now, the reason is because, like I mentioned here, as men believe working out and getting muscular is a good demonstration of this, especially to impress women, gymnastic sports or fluid movements involving skill and physical ability are often much better at this, and they're much better at drawing attention, especially. If you want to draw attention, you don't walk in there as like a giant muscular thing who isn't able to even correctly fluidly move their arms. You walk in there doing a backflip. You walk anywhere doing a backflip, everybody's going to look at you and go like, whoa, what the hell? That's an example. Fluid movement, I think, is the biggest example of this. In terms of this intelligence. So what I mean by this is hand-eye coordination. So hand-eye coordination, foot-eye coordination, or any sort of these skilled kind of efforts, these are much better examples of kinesthetic operational intelligence. Working out and getting your muscles bigger, these are only slight prerequisites, but they aren't the main thing, if that makes sense. Now, the seventh kind of intelligence is linguistic expressive intelligence, and this is charisma part 2, and individual specific, not being group specific. Now, linguistic expressive intelligence is mastering language forms to communicate, persuading, or inspiring with nuance and impact. Now, real-life examples of this could look something along the lines of either being funny and having a sense of humor, which is shown by other people actually enjoying to be around you. That's a really important part. If other people don't enjoy being around you, but you think you're funny, you're not funny, all right? Or there's something else that they don't like about you. Or a salesperson crafting compelling pitches to close deals with various clients. Now, the best example that I can think of for this quote is, "The pen is mightier than the sword." So you could also put this in terms of social connective intelligence, although I think this is better because it's more individual, or I view this a little bit more individual because you're assuming a sword as the individual, in my case anyways. Now, this comes in two forms, in this case, the linguistic expressive intelligence, being verbally proficient as well as your looks. Now, your looks make the initial encounter more or less effective, and your looks actually just act as a multiplier, while the verbal proficiency is what makes the encounter last and what actually makes it matter. So the thing is, if your looks are like a 10, right, but your verbal proficiency is like a 2 or a 1, then remember, this is all a multiplier. So even if your verbal proficiency is 0, right, and you're really, really bad in terms of being verbally proficient, but your looks are a 10 times 0 is still 0, right? So that's why I say this acts as a multiplier. It makes the initial encounter really good, but the verbal proficiency is what actually makes the encounter exist. And there's a little bit more to this whole linguistic expressive intelligence, which is found in the relationship playlist, and being nonchalant, and a lot of other stuff. If you're interested, go check out those videos, and not only that, under the Think for Yourself playlist, because those two actually intertwine when it comes to being nonchalant, which is an essential part of being masculine, by the way. The eighth kind of intelligence is quantitative pattern intelligence. Now, quantitative pattern intelligence is manipulating numbers, probabilities, and sequences to forecast or optimize outcomes. Once again, AI kills at this one. It is insanely good at this. And if you don't know who this is Galileo Galilei. Mathematics is the language which God has written the universe. I think this is true, actually. There's definitely something here. It's quite true. There's some numbers that just keep appearing, like certain constants, which is very strange. Now, real-life examples of quantitative pattern intelligence could look something along the lines of a fantasy sports player analyzing stats to predict team performance and win in leagues, or using data on stocks to determine if there is a pattern which can be taken advantage of and you can make money on. Now, AI, once again, is extremely effective at this, and it will probably only get better and better and better. So if you do have this kind of intelligence, there's a really good chance that it is going to get replaced in some way, or at the very least, it's going to be amplified times 10, and you'll be doing it on your own rather than working for somebody else. The ninth kind of intelligence is ethical integrative intelligence. Now, this is what I would like to call philosophy or acceptance. Now, ethical integrative intelligence is balancing moral principles, diverse viewpoints, and consequences for just decision making. Now, these two I actually have in another video, but the only wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. I think this is an incredibly important point when it comes to acceptance and being a loner. That is what gives you time to wonder, to search for the truth, and to have holy curiosity, and to make your life worth living. This is what goes under philosophy a little bit more, and this one goes a little bit more under acceptance. Now, real life examples of this can look something along the lines of a teacher mediating disputes by considering all perspectives fairly. By the way, if you do find this, your odds of finding this are near zero today, because teachers are underpaid and you're probably going to get lower quality ones, if anything. But regardless, you're probably not going to find this also, because this is just really hard to find. There's like one person who might have done this before, and his name's Warren Smith, and he was fired. And now he has a really popular YouTube channel because he was fired. So I find it funny. And they did the opposite. Woke ideology tried to cancel him, and all they did was they made him more popular. Or another example of this could be Confucius developing philosophies that balance ethics with societal harmony in ancient China. Now, most humans today are lacking in this pretty heavily. And the people who are strongest in this specific aspect are often either monks or people who are spiritual in some sort of a sense. So yes, you might say, what? Being religious is a kind of intelligence? Kind of. You basically have to find acceptance. I made a whole video on this if you're really interested. Go check out that video. It's really important. You do have to find acceptance in some way. The video on religion basically explains this sort of thing of acceptance. And you could go check out the nonchalant video because it's actually related to that. Now let's go a little bit more into this, because I think it's also really important as to why exactly this is so important. Why exactly is ethical integrative intelligence underrated? And it's kind of OP. This is where the true test of the only wisdom is in knowing you know nothing is amplified times 10. So the reason is because if you don't have this form of acceptance and you don't have this ethical integrative intelligence, or in this case what I like to call philosophy, this is what existential dread looks like, and this is you. Those feelings where you get where it's like, oh my God, everything's hopeless, everything, like, it's cooked, it's all cooked, right? This is a great example of this. Now, the thing is, sometimes the world is incredibly confusing, and sometimes it doesn't make any sense as to why certain things happen, or maybe how you might be so lucky in some aspect, or maybe the coincidence of certain things happening repeatedly. For instance, you seeing a certain number over and over again as one example, or you seeing a certain kind of picture or a name over and over and over again, or vice versa, or of both the previously mentioned things. But whatever the case may be, acceptance is key. Otherwise, you get this existential dread feeling, and this is like death. It's like worse than death sort of feeling. Now, this might seem like useless intelligence, like I said before, but it is far more valuable than you think, especially if you fear death. This is what I've noticed the biggest indicator of what a lack of this intelligence looks like. So if you fear death more, you are lacking in this intelligence more. And I don't know if you've heard the quote, a fear of death is a fear of life. I think that is so true. So once again, this is pretty crucial. Now, the 10th kind of intelligence is digital navigational intelligence. AI kills in this one again. Now, digital navigational intelligence is navigating, creating, or optimizing within digital systems, algorithms, and tech ecosystems. So the quote that I think demonstrates this best is artificial intelligence is not a substitute for human intelligence. It is a tool to amplify human creativity and ingenuity. Now, you might say, okay, that's like sort of BS, right? What does it mean? Like, what's in a real life example? Well, a real life example is a gamer modding video games to create custom levels using coding tools, or a data scientist optimizing machine learning models for AI applications. Now, this is where we come to what does AI do very well? Yeah, that's right. It's really good at this again. So once again, if you are strong in this, there's a really good chance that AI is just going to only amplify this field. And in doing so, it does also replace who does and doesn't have a job in that field. Now, the thing is, biological evolution is kind of like technology, except technology is just synthetic made evolution. So what I mean by this is, as you can see with my picture at the top right here, this is biological evolution, and this takes like hundreds and millions of years and stuff, right? Technology is basically amplifying this and making this accelerate very, very quickly, except we're not necessarily doing this for the actual biology itself. Now, with technology advancing so rapidly and older generations having a hard time keeping up with this whole technological thing because they're not actually even updated on this, and you could see so many examples of this, of congressmen and other people who have absolutely no clue of how the digital world works whatsoever. How TikTok works is one of the examples. If you ever saw the congressional meetings on that, it was like, oh my god, it's just painful to watch. So yeah, this will only become more valuable as time goes on. So even though AI only amplifies this, having this to a certain degree is definitely necessary, and improving upon this regularly is also pretty important because it will save you a lot of time. The 11th kind of intelligence is intuitive instinctual intelligence. Now, intuitive instinctual intelligence is drawing on the subconscious cues and rapid insights for decisions without actually the full analysis. So what I like the most about this quote, because it's so true, and this describes women perfectly, I have defined intuition as perception via the unconscious. This is so true. I think this is super, super, super important. Now, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. So it honors the servant as in it honors the rational mind, but it does not honor, it doesn't actually even remember the gift, in this case, the intuitive mind. And in this case, this means basically viewing the world unconsciously. Now, women have incredibly, incredibly strong instinctive, intuitive intelligence. But we'll get to that eventually. Now, real-life examples of this can look something along the lines of woman shit-testing men in order to determine competency and congruency. Or suddenly getting a really, really strong gut feeling that something is off. And it is off. And you realize that it's off. And you get to experience it. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but hopefully you get out of there the second you get that gut feeling. Now, this kind of intelligence is extremely strong in women and naturally comes when it's shit-testing men all the time. Although the weakness of it is that it is more prone to cognitive bias and to error. Now, in most cases, people have difficulty differentiating between intuition versus conscious, though an example being feeling lucky versus actually being lucky as an example. Yes, luck is a thing, by the way. I talk about that in my luck is a skill video. I really do think luck is a thing, although it's like really complicated. I haven't really figured it out myself, but I think I have a better understanding of it. The 12th kind of intelligence is holistic environmental intelligence. Now, this is the bigger picture kind of intelligence. Holistic environmental intelligence is perceiving systemic interconnections across natural, social, or global scales to sustain equilibrium and anticipate effects. So what exactly might that look like? An example is an urban planner designing cities to be made for humans in Groningen, the Netherlands, not for cars. In this case, the United States, where everything's a highway and you always have to get in a car to go anywhere. It's really, really stupid in my opinion. Or another example could be the Inuit anticipating Arctic ice changes by linking weather patterns to animal migration and community survival. So basically, they have to be able to see the bigger picture and realize, oh, this is what's going to happen by this happening, right? So this kind of intelligence is basically being able, once again, like I said before, to see the bigger picture of how things might be played out. Now, the problem with this intelligence is that it is consumed by poor ideology in most cases, as communism or woke ideology, as some examples, are based on the subjective reality rather than the objective reality, and it's why they don't work. And when they try to incorporate those ideologies from subjective to objective reality, they'd never work. It's supposed to be objective to objective reality. In this case, the Inuit people or the urban planner, right? Now, as I have mentioned before, intelligence is actually more so an algorithm of navigating information rather than the information and the stored data itself. Both psychology today as well as AI systems say this exact thing, exactly the same thing, by the way. Memorization is not a form of intelligence. Exactly the same way sort of muscle is not a form of kinesthetic intelligence. It's actually just an amplifier, or in this case, you could view it as an amplifier. Now, AI is extremely strong in digital navigational intelligence, quantitative pattern intelligence, analytical intelligence, linguistic expressive intelligence, and synthetic intelligence. Any fields of work which demand these heavily, majority of jobs today, by the way, especially profession-based work, will most likely be replaced by AI or the individual being able to handle it all by themselves. Now, if you really are interested in all this stuff, maybe even why school will become obsolete, in my view, or learning about anything, then go check out all of my playlists, and it will explain a whole lot more, and especially the Think for Yourself playlist. If you want to know the details of like health or relationships, you can go check out those playlists, but I think the Think for Yourself playlist is incredibly important, probably the most important one to watch first, and then afterwards you can watch other ones. Once again, all of this information is free. I should charge hundreds of dollars for this information because in my opinion it's so valuable, especially the relationships playlist and the health playlist. That is essential. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you found the video helpful or informative. If you have any comments, leave them down in the comments below. Share, subscribe, comment down below. Helps the channel grow, right? Once again, you have any questions about anything you want me to make in the future, by the way, any specific video topics, in the comments below. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.